Welcome back to Bizarre Books, the channel where I narrate the books that no one else will. Some may find content from this channel disturbing, so viewer discretion is strongly advised. If you derive value from this channel and want to support my efforts, please consider donating via the links provided in the description below this video. If you do donate, you can request a specific book or chapter that you'd like to hear me narrate. The Gates of Janus by Brady, Chapter 6. For here the lover and killer are mingled, who had one body and one heart. Keith Douglas, 1920 to 1944. From a specific point in spiritual and intellectual commitment, the serial killer is subconsciously evolving towards becoming his own god and executioner. With each subsequent killing, the homicidal drug, blunted by habitual use, creates a diminishing and disappointing impression. The extraordinary becomes increasingly ordinary. This confirms my view that most killers do not find the act of murder itself pleasurable. Increasingly, it is viewed more as a necessary conclusion to an exercise of power and will. Ironically, having striven for absolute freedom, he has found its antithesis, a categorical imperative, a wearisome cleaning up after the feast, or, more fatal to his welfare and continued freedom, he may view the necessary task as an irritable imposition exacted by those he increasingly regards as the inferior enemy ranged against him. An additional minority of serial killers may kill not only as a measure of self-survival, but also to provoke greater public storm, having also become addicted to their own publicity and undergone a complete personality change in the process. Just as society believes itself justified in punishing the criminal for the hurt he has inflicted, so also does the serial killer in relation to society. He is out to exact post-traumatic vengeance, compensation for the real or imaginary injuries he has experienced at the hands of society, and is essentially exulting in the cathartic joy of finally declaring open war. He rationalizes and excuses his barbaric behavior in the same terminology as the state. This is war. Except that, by virtue of acting alone, against great odds, pitting his wits and his life against all the organized power of the state, he feels morally superior to the state. It is this quality of extreme individualism that fascinates the public and excites their secret envy, fear, and hatred. But who is the hero? Who is the anti-hero? We cannot avoid the quandary, quote, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. End quote. Incongruously, as mentioned, the sadistic type of serial killer, if he allowed his instincts for survival to be overwhelmed by pathological desire, would much rather inflict life than death upon the victim, so that he might savour the knowledge that the victim has been forced to suffer the memory of the ordeal for the rest of his or her days. The living victim would serve as a psychic, sentient trophy of the crime, thus prolonging the intimate relationship or psychosexual link between victim and perpetrator. The sadistic predator would be perfectly aware that it would further torture the victims to know that the person who inflicted such traumatic indignities upon them is still alive to remember, or perhaps more importantly, publicly divulge. This mutual fear of public testimony and sensational dissemination of the intimate facts of the crime also intensifies the relationship between victim and perpetrator. Thus, the latter's clemency would be ostensibly humane, but for inhumane motives. Mercury has its cruel side. Similarly, the captured, sadistic killer may ask, is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole more compassionate than a quick, honest execution? Sadistic purists among members of the public would prefer a lengthy revenge. In fact, they would probably like to enjoy both if it were possible, execution and life imprisonment, or to take pleasure from the vision of him rotting in hell. Therefore, the logical extension of their desires would be execution by lengthy torture, their savagery possibly surpassing that of the killer to whom they believe themselves morally superior. Again, philosophically and psychologically, this would play into the hands of the killer. The concept of hell and endless torment is popular with those who believe they aren't headed there. Unlike Dostoevsky's character, I would rather be dead, Thelma and Louise style, than stand for eternity on the ledge staring into the abyss. Which would you choose? Many serial killers believe in hell on earth, consequently administering it to those who appear never to have tasted its gall, those who seem to have cornered all the luck. The killer might believe democratically in the equal, abstract, random distribution of misery, as it were, the reverse side of feeling yourself unfortunate for having no shoes until you met a man with no feet. Quote, I intend to weave the factor of mental illness throughout the broadcloth of this factual and philosophical discourse, without unduly distracting or taxing the reader by use of overmuch psychological or psychiatric terminology. I wish to communicate, not obfuscate. This I partly hope to achieve by foraging through the criminal psyche in individual instances, particularly in the realm of psychological or psychiatric profiling, both as a past criminal participant and a present objective observer. Thus, I live in the world rather as a spectator of mankind than as one of the species. End quote. Joseph Addison, 1672 to 1719. Whether or not some forensic facts, conclusions, and interpretations disturb the mental equilibrium of the reader in the process is an abstract factor which cannot be allowed to intrude if we are to have a clinical examination of reality, or a perception of reality. A dissection of what murder is really all about, from the point of view of a serial killer, for a change. Many of you sitting out there in cosy easy chairs with a drink at your elbow and the prospect of vicarious excitement ahead of you as you settle down to read, have probably assured yourself in advance that there is no danger of you identifying with or even empathizing with anyone you are about to encounter in these pages. Indeed, you already feel intellectually and morally superior because this is a book written by a criminal about other criminals, creatures of the underworld, a distant subculture, whereas you have nothing to hide or be ashamed of, have you? That inner glow of sanctity feels almost as good as a large glass of double malt whiskey, but not quite as genuine or fully matured. The plain fact is, heavens above, the criminals feel exactly the same way about you, in spades. I reiterate, common sense should caution that if you indifferently isolate criminals and pretend you cannot identify with them even in human terms, when freed, they will isolate you with extreme prejudice. Even as you read this, one may be travelling through the night toward you, may be trying your doors and windows at this very moment. If so, too late to repent or recant. You have created the enemy within, and within he will come, ready to stare you out of countenance. Mark his eyes, the indifference reflecting your own of some minutes ago. You belatedly understand that sinking feeling. He has no more mercy for you than you had for him. You are staring at your alter ego for the first and perhaps final time. You are thinking of all the things you will probably never see again, just as he did in prison. You begin to feel sorry, mainly for yourself, but also perhaps just a bit for him. He may recognize it, see you as a human being rather than an object of abstract revenge in solitary prison dreams. Quote, "Did you ever share the lack of innocent obsession that I have, forever being drawn back compulsively to places of childhood, localities of spiritual renewal, touchstones to recharge the flagging batteries, places where the feet itched to make contact with the soil of your roots, hands ached to caress the texture of old buildings and trees you once knew well but had almost forgotten? They look much older and smaller than you remembered them, of course, more vulnerable, in need of tactile comfort. It is mutual. A touch of sympathetic energy spans the lapsed years. For that moment, you forget your quarrels with the world. You are innocent again, and so is mankind." End quote. In childhood years, I was not the stereotypical loner so loved by the popular media. Friends formed around me eagerly in the school playground, listened to me talk, and I took it as natural. Apparently, I had a descriptive talent and contagious enthusiasm, all harmless adventurous stuff, no devious intent, no sense of superiority. Later, in my early teens at senior school, matters change imperceptibly. Gangs formed around me. Similarly, I had no conscious sense as to why, only that I again took it as a natural process. I was not consciously aware of being out to gain followers, but follow they did, obviously predisposed to go where I led. That our activities became criminal was also accepted as natural. The more money we stole, the more fun we had. Only when we were caught by the police did a minority drift away, mainly at the behest of their restrictive parents. I hardly noticed, nor did the remaining others. Replacements joined us, and we continued to enjoy the fruits of our activities. Gradually, I began to adopt a more studious, professional attitude toward crime. My instinctive form of relativism developed into a pragmatic philosophy. I began to choose my followers. This book is not an autobiography, but these passages form a brief, personal introduction before tackling the main subject. The purpose was to explain why, on those occasions when I returned to childhood haunts as an adult, I couldn't get enough of people, roaming the old bars and cafes, soaking up the atmosphere and delighting in overheard conversations. Each face I then observed seemed to radiate unique character. I felt truly alive. All criminal inclinations and ambitions forgotten, erased by temporarily regaining the vitality of seeing the world through the eyes of a child. That microscopic form of vision where nothing is unimportant and almost everything is fascinating. Does this seem rather foolish to you? Somehow I don't think so. Too much of life is wasted in pretending we are something we are not. That we know everything instead of relatively nothing, are invulnerable and in total control of all we survey, and capital at caring for nothing, are beyond good and evil and proud of it. We are what we believe we are at given times. But we are also reluctant to admit that the child is still there, deep in each of us, occasionally peeping out to laugh at what we have become. And we take no offence at it, but joy from being reminded. It helps us recognise that, without knowing it at the time, we created a barren role as we travelled the years, have inexorably become that role, and are stuck with it. The past, our future, vainly play-acting our lives away for the benefit of other people, even total strangers. As one cannot afford to show weakness in the prehistoric ambience of prison, at least I now have pragmatic reasons for persevering in my beliefs. Kindness of any description is invariably interpreted as weakness. This tendency is also prevalent in the outside world, as is fear of the truth. Prince Mishkin in Dostoevsky's The Idiot is regarded in what is laughingly termed polite society as being a simpleton because of his habit of saying what he thinks and believes without due deference to a culture in which social suppression is regarded as a virtue. His honesty not only disarms his peers but also scares them, exposing their avaricious shallowness and threatening their defensive lifestyle. To them, Mishkin is too in touch with his feelings for comfort. They are too close to the surface, and that enables him to express his thoughts and emotions without cosmetic social adulteration. That is also a characteristic of the criminal, who cannot silently or passively accept the transparent hypocrisy and greed of those who rise to control society and preserve the status quo in their favour. Hence, the expedient term sociopath is applied to him. Quote, "The only absolute knowledge attainable by man is that life is meaningless." End quote. Tolstoy. What do you, the reader, really believe in, and would you dare express it publicly? Now it's time for you to accompany me into the esoteric territory you have chosen to enter. An Hieronymus Bosch landscape, the abyss you already know much more of than you care to acknowledge. Seduced by repulsion, the vision gives form to the act. Quote, "Thou shalt have one God only, who would be at the expense of two. No graven images may be worshipped except the currency. Swear not at all, for thy curse thine enemy is none the worse. At church on Sunday to attend will serve to keep the world thy friend. Honour thy parents, that is all from whom advancement may befall. Thou shalt not kill, but needst not strive, officiously to keep alive. Do not adultery commit, advantage rarely comes of it. Thou shalt not steal an empty feat, when it's so lucrative to cheat. Bear not false witness, let the lie have time on its own wings to fly. Thou shalt not covet, but tradition approves all forms of competition." End quote. The latest Decalogue, Arthur Hugh Clough, 1819 to 1861. End of chapter 6.